Are we good? We're good. Okay, cool. I'm going to call the Thursday, April 21, 2022 Executive Committee meeting to order. I see it's 12:03. I had to wait for that. Sorry. I'm going to now call the Executive Committee meeting of Thursday, April 21, 2022 to order. It is now 12:03 p.m. Please mute your phones and whatever else you have, unless you're recognized to speak. I'll now call the roll. First, Vice Chair Geisinger.
I'm here.
And second Vice Chair Catlin is in the emergency room. Secretary Sloan.
Here.
Treasurer Whitmore.
Present.
And I'm here. So yeah, good luck to Peggy and her husband on that. Hope everything's okay. Do we have any other directors in attendance? I'm looking. I don't see any. Am I missing any other directors? No. I see our general counsel, Melanie Snyder. I see our board office manager, Barbara McManus. I see other individuals from RTD, Marie Snell, Randy Hunter, John McKay, Michael Davies, Mike Smith, and Sherry Parrish. Welcome, everybody. Deborah Johnson, our general manager and CEO, in case you didn't know, is not going to be here today. She is attending the National Advanced Technology Transit Vehicle Advisory Panel in Atlanta, Georgia.
That rolls right off your tongue, Vince.
Yeah, it does. I'm sure there's an acronym that's a hell of a lot easier. Anyway, this is, I've been waiting I think I alluded to having a ad hoc committee to explore zero emission vehicles, their integration and implementation. And so we're waiting for Deborah to come back from this this presentation and seminar, because she'll get some of the newest and most updated information. I think we're going to have a study session first and then maybe the ad hoc committee, but I digress. Next is our public comment section. I'd like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee. If you wish to speak, and if not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Staff will unmute you when it's your turn to speak. If you are dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will have to be submitted in writing. Barbara, were there any emailed comments received for this afternoon's meeting?
No,
And are there any speakers in the queue to speak?
I see no speakers.
Okay, with no participants in the queue, I'm going to close the public comment period, and I'll go on to our sole action item. It's the April board meeting agenda review. Is there a motion to approve the April board agenda to the board meeting on April 26th?
So moved.
Marjorie Sloan, and is there a second?
Second.
Troy Whitmore, all in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All in favor, any opposed? Seeing none, that goes, any discussion on the agenda, first of all, I guess. Should have done it before the vote, but no discussion, good to go, cool. The audit ad hoc committee planned to present a discussion item in the committee report section. However, seeing as Director Catlin, the ad hoc committee chair, is absent today and cannot provide an update, I think it'd be best if we move that report to the May board meeting. I'm not sure if the board report is ready and the board office has not received the final document for today's packet. So to be on the safe side, I think we'll talk about that in May. Any other comments at all on next week's board meeting agenda? No, and there were no votes, so that moves forward unanimously. We've got one discussion item on our agenda, and that is our monthly government relations report. Mr. Michael Davies, are you prepared to present your report?
Yes, thank you, Chair and members of the
Great,
committee. Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. I have a very brief report for you. Starting at the federal level, Congress has been on recess the last couple of weeks, so relatively quiet in Congress. Staff is largely closely monitoring the appropriations process that's anticipated for fiscal year 23, and that's anticipated to start roughly late May, early June. And so that is a lot of our focus at the federal level at this time. Moving on to the state, and that's where really a lot of the focus over the last month has been, largely tracking bills as they work themselves through the General Assembly. It is certainly crunch time over there, and they're trying to get through a lot of bills before deadlines. As an update on the two specific bills that the board has taken a support position on, first with SB 180, and that is the fare free transit funding bill. And that bill passed the Senate yesterday, and so it has been introduced over into the House Energy and Environment Committee. It is not on schedule in the House at this time, but has been introduced in the committee, and waiting to see when that will receive its first hearing in the House. And then with regards to HB 1026, this is the Alternative Transportation Tax Credit bill that would offer tax credits to employers that purchase transit passes, among other modes of transit as well. That bill is still stuck in the House Appropriations Committee. The deadline really to move these bills is coming up very quickly. Not a clear understanding if that bill has the support to be able to move out of the House and over to the Senate. So we're tracking that closely. But that bill is still stuck in the House Appropriations Committee at this time. That does it for the two updates on the bills. And then just very briefly on the local level, as mentioned in the written report, our GM and CEO Deborah Johnson did have an opportunity to speak at the Metro Mayor's Caucus alongside Shoshana Liu from CDOT and Doug Rex from DRCOG. And that was a productive conversation and good presentation by our GM. And we are continuing to work closely with the Metro Mayor's Caucus as they are involved in closely tracking the SB 180, the fare free transit bill in the General Assembly. So that does it for my report, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the report, Michael. Are there any questions for Michael? Secretary Sloan.
Yeah, I have one. We received a copy of the Metro Mayor's letter about SB 180, and it did indicate support for full repayment of RTD's fares for the month of August. And I wondered if that has any chance of being added with the hearings in the House.
Yes, thank you, Director. I haven't seen any indication yet that there will be an amendment on that. I did notice that section of the letter from the Metro Mayor's Caucus as well, and certainly tracking that issue closely. But at this time, no indication if there would be an amendment or support for that this time.
Great, thanks for that. First Vice Chair Geisinger.
Thanks. Also about the Metro Mayor's letter, it was nice to see their support. I don't know if it'll take off or not, but I thought it was signed by the mayors. It might be nice if we sent back a thank you, maybe the chair and I could sign it or something. And I didn't think we necessarily have to go to the whole board for that, and could just talk to the executive committee. Does that make sense?
Sounds good to me. Everybody thumbs up. Troy, thumbs up. Yes, okay. Great. Thanks for that suggestion. That's a good suggestion. And Michael, thanks so much for the regular updates on the bill tracking stuff. That's very helpful. And I know it's a lot of work for you to do that, but I do appreciate it. Any other questions?
I actually had one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lynn. Yeah.
If
Sorry.
I may, Michael, and maybe I should know this, but you're in your report, you mentioned that the FTA annual 2022 disbursements would be going out, and that they're used for maintenance. I know in our budget we were budgeting to clear up that backlog. Was this money part of what we were budgeting towards that? Do you know?
Yes. So the background on that apportionment notice from FTA, that was the official full year apportionment notice. If you recall, the Omnibus Appropriations Act was enacted, and that really approved the appropriations to go to the full year. Up until then, it had been partial year apportionments based on last year's levels. This would be FAST Act levels. And so once the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, was signed into law, that increased some of those formula fundings. And so it needed to, FTA wasn't able to release the full apportionment until Congress did the Omnibus Appropriations Act to adhere funding levels to the IIJA. So that is why that was released. Just the flow of Congress moving. That bill, the IIJA, did increase funding for those formula programs by about 30%. And so the apportionment notices that went out to RTD was about 30% higher than the same funding for last year. So those formula funding grant programs, the largest being the urbanized area formula funding grant program, that funding generally is eligible for operating maintenance. It cannot be spent on salaries, but it is for operating maintenance. It is also not eligible for new capital construction. Again, it's really for operating maintenance construction. Those can be capital programs, but on the maintenance side of the book.
And do you know if that's if the extra 30% is money that we budgeted in our budget this year, or that might be a question for Doug? Huh?
I think that's a question for Doug.
Okay.
From what I recall, I don't think we anticipated that the IIJ would be signed in for last year's budget. For our current budget, we were tracking with the funding levels in the FAST Act, and so, but yeah, I think that would be a question for Doug to confirm.
Thank you. Great.
Great. Does that conclude your questions?
Yes, thanks.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks again, Michael.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on to other matters. The first is the reinstatement of board travel budgets. The board office and I are drafting a recommended action that will be introduced at the May 10 Finance and Planning Committee meeting. That resolution, if approved, will return $3,000 for each director and $3,750 for the chair to be used for out-of-district travel-related expenses in 2022. Historically, each director has received $6,000 for travel, and the chairs will receive $7,500 per year. But as this is a partial reinstatement for June through December, the travel budget restoration will only be 50% of the traditional yearly amount. And as there are APTA and Revolution and other things that are cropping up and returning to in-person, we thought it prudent to reinstate that in case any of the directors want to use some of this for their travel and training. Are there any questions from anybody about that? Okay, cool. Next on the other matter agenda is our post-COVID meeting expectations. So I know a lot of people are eager to get back to in-person meetings. One of the biggest impediments to us doing that at Blake is the work that's being done on RT&D. That's the big conference room in the basement that we used to meet in person at. They've done a lot of work. They've changed lights and wiring and things like that. But the big thing that's still ongoing is upgrading all of the IT stuff, all the technology infrastructure that is there that helps us do our meetings. And if we go back to in person, will allow us to have people appear virtually for comments and things like that. My understanding is we're looking at fall. I've heard October as a possible time that this could be completed. But, you know, it's again, dependent upon supply chain issues and things like that. So that's my understanding of what's going on with the return to in-person meetings. Does anybody have any questions or comments about in-person? First Vice Chair Geisinger.
Thanks. I wonder if we could start with doing our committee meetings in person and do them upstairs in the board conference room, or whatever the next biggest conference room would be, and still Zoom them for public. But since it's a smaller group typically, I thought maybe we could start with that.
Yeah, and the board office conference room is available, but Ms. McManus, I believe there are still some technology issues there for streaming. Is that correct?
Well, yes, I know that folks were thinking that we might move into a smaller room once we resume business as usual. But the smaller rooms, in that scenario, do not allow for any public to attend. Not that that will be happening anytime soon. And if we did meet five people, a 5-person committee in the board conference room, or a 7-person committee in conference room A downstairs, just under the current guidelines, we would still have to have our devices in front of us, and the meeting would look exactly the way it's looking right now. So, if folks wanted to attend in that way, we could. I had this discussion in my one-on-one with Deborah as well. And, having those meetings starting at 5:30 as they do would also bring in the need for other resources in the building. So we're looking at what all of those components look like, just so we have a backup plan between now and then. But again, it's not just add water.
Yeah.
So-
Mr. Chair, if
Go
I
ahead.
may, I'm kind of needing to depart to get back in so I don't miss the heart of this next meeting.
Sure.
I think we're okay on action items and we're all right with quorum. Is that correct, Barbara?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for understanding. I am going to depart. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks, Troy. Goodbye.
Bye, Troy.
And Lynn, is that complete? You have more questions or?
Just, I wasn't clear, but you said we'd be in front of our computers in terms of Zooming the meeting. Is that what you mean?
Yes. There's no way to capture the whole room. The technology is not there to capture the whole room at this point. So any of the meetings would look exactly like as if you were home, only you would all be in the same room in the same building.
Uh-huh. Well, it might be worth trying. What our other option is to wait till the basement is finished. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because then we could capture the room.
You would be able to capture the room. You would be able to capture each of the respective speakers. And also it would look like it was before COVID where we would capture the whole chamber. But we also would have the Zoom component as well, because we'll be continuing with both venues moving forward. And then the board office's thought was the committees of 5 and 7 would run across the top of the dais, just for convenience sake of running the meeting and capturing that video when it's up and running. And then the full board meeting, of course, will be whatever the chair's assigned seats are, since we haven't gone through that exercise this year, since we're not meeting in person.
Well, I guess, I'll let others speak if they have, but, the hope with going to smaller committees was to get better discussions. So I don't love the dais, but so I don't know if there's a way to brainstorm, or try out with a smaller meeting, and just see what we can put together. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're anticipating not ever bringing the public back, that's one decision. I mean, we could reconfigure the room in some way, shape, or form. We aren't making any changes to the furniture per se on the dais, because there is no budget for that. So, if the smaller committees seem like they're going to be moving forward and successful, then we can look at reconfiguring, the furniture as we move down the road and budget allows us to replace what we have.
So my understanding is if you use the board office conference room, everybody's just going to be on Zoom, but still sometimes And Lynn, I think I agree that sometimes there's a better synergy when people are together before and after meetings and things like that. So if there's any way, Barbara, I guess my question would be, if that were something, and I think we should leave it to the committee chairs to have this discussion and decide among the committee members what they want to do. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, Melanie, but the committee chairs could figure it out. But I think they would need to be armed with knowledge about what that looks like. What does that entail in terms of staffing, feeding, security,
Budget.
janitorial? What kind of budget impact might that have if a committee wanted to meet in person? So if there's any way to get a thumbnail idea of what that looks like, and then we can present it to the committee chairs for their consideration if they wanted to move forward or not.
Okay.
Cool. Does that work?
Great.
Lynn? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the post-COVID meeting expectations or comments? Okay. Seeing none, I'll move on to the last one. That's the board retreat summary. And I think just recently we've all received the summary prepared by CDR Associates. I know I've taken a cursory look at it and looked okay. I know First Vice Chair Geisinger had some comments and we made some modifications to more accurately reflect what was happening. So I guess the real question for us to consider as we move forward is, what do we do with that now, right? What's the plan? And I think, as I said at the retreat, it appears to me that there are some things, some ideas that are more administrative in nature and can be implemented without board action. And then there are some other changes that are more critical that might need board action, for example, and even bylaw changes as well. So I'm going to be reaching out to each of you individually to talk about the process of going through all of those things we talked about, all the list of ideas and concerns and so forth, and how we can segregate those into two pots, right? One pot is the administrative stuff that hopefully we can change and put into place fairly easily. And the other is the stuff that's going to need more board consideration. And hopefully we can come back at the next month's meeting and talk in more detail about what those things are that we think need board action and what the plan is going to be to move those forward. I'd like to, if it needs a recommended action to come out of the executive committee for the board's consideration, I'd like to get that hopefully on the June timeline as we progress into the summer and we move farther. There's no meetings in August, and as you get into September, this is an election year, and I think a lot of people are going to be tied up and busy thinking along those lines. So the more we can get pushed into the May, June, July timeframe, the better. Any other? Ms. McManus, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, just to tag on to that, I know that Director Geisinger and Director Sloan we have made all of the administrative changes that we talked about in the bylaws. And then there are some substantive changes that are on the table for changes. And we decided to wait until after the retreat to see if anything came up that needed to be changed and or added based on our conversations and the outcomes of the retreat in making the bylaw changes. And it's my hope, because of some of the reasons that Chair Busick just brought up, that we can work diligently on that, get it reviewed by legal, and bring that forward for board action in July, since there are no meetings in August, and it is going to be a very busy fall. So I would like, this committee to entertain that timeline.
Thanks for those comments. Secretary Sloan?
And this is along the same lines that Barbara mentioned. And you were talking about items that need board action. One of the changes that Lynn and I had worked on, and I believe it's about ready, was specifically approved of essentially at the retreat, and and ended up in the notes of the meeting. And that is informal meetings for purposes of a smaller group in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. That one in particular, is ready to go. There are some other more minor items that Lynn and I were talking about that I don't think would take more than a concentrated focus of us in one phone call. We could probably get them to the board office for legal review and incorporating them into the guidelines. Now, I would hope we can rely on the board office for what items need bylaw changes and what items can simply just be incorporated into the guidelines.
Right. And Barbara, your hand's up.
So that sounds like a good plan. In terms of some of the conversations that we've had with the meetings of small groups, I think that we have to spend some time and work on what that looks like, because any of those small group meetings look exactly like every other meeting.
In what way do you mean look like every other, the agenda or the location? I was thinking we would not need to Zoom them, but we could make, the public aware of notice and can be present. So what do you mean by look like the other meeting?
Well, I mean, we have certain requirements, and Melanie, do you want to speak to this in more detail? Because you and I have had this conversation over time as well.
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind you've got open meetings requirements, and then you have logistical and operational issues. And Barbara, I'm going to defer to you on the latter. For open meetings purposes, you just have to notice the meeting agenda in advance and make it available and open to the public, or the legal requirements.
So we have no legal obligation under the open meetings law to Zoom it or broadcast it in any way, as long as we give notice of its location and subject matter and all that.
And the opportunity to allow the public to attend. So the venue would have to be, you'd have to be able to let the public access that.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Marjorie, did you have any more questions or?
No, that was it. I just was unsure about look like, because these will be informal. There can be an expression of the topic of the meeting. I'm not sure we were contemplating an agenda for each of the meetings, but it sounds like they really are not going to mimic committee meetings or board meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in terms of inviting the public, how would we do that if we're not making it accessible to the public via Zoom or however else we're looking at it?
They'd have to come, I guess, right? I mean, we could just say it's at, Panera or something. If anybody wants to come.
Well, let's work through that and make sure that Melanie, I'm sorry, I referred to you as legal, Melanie, you're right there. Make sure that Melanie says, okay, sounds good. And let's get that going along with the other bylaw changes. So we come back next month in executive session. I'd like to have a really firm idea of what we're going to look at for bylaw changes. And ultimately, if this one with the smaller meetings is like ready to roll, let's get it into recommended action format and roll it out, maybe in a May operations committee meeting, if that's possible. The sooner the better. And I think I prefer personally the idea of breaking things out into separate recommended actions instead of putting all of your bylaw changes into one boat. If somebody wants to sink one of the items in the boat, everything goes away. So maybe we should think about how we approach that as well. But yeah, that sounds good. And I hope the timeline can work. We need to get moving. Some things we need to fix.
Right.
Yes, Lynn.
I wonder if that should go to operations or back to our executive committee if it's about bylaw changes and
I
things.
think we got to, do we have to run it through a committee, don't we? We have to have committee and then board.
This-
Is that,
This one doesn't count.
I don't know. Melanie?
I think you could initiate the recommended action in executive committee.
And then take it right to the board?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Let's do that then. Yeah, excellent. Sorry.
Okay, I
Thanks, Lynn,
didn't
for
know
that
either.
clarification. Cool. Okay, so anything else on the board retreat summary and what the kind of thumbnail sketch of the plan is? Good. Any other matters to come before the executive committee? Secretary Sloan.
Yeah, I'm just very chatty today. I have two items. The easy one is what is the status of the proposal for free fares on election day? I know we asked for further data on that, but we were also told we need to move. Is that on a proposed agenda for the summer?
And Barbara, have you heard anything about the finance committee taking that on?
No, nothing formal. I haven't seen anything formal yet. But I will take a peek in the look ahead
Okay,
and see if anything has been added since our last meeting. I think we have another look ahead meeting later today, so I can find out and let everybody know.
great. If you find something, I'll just email it, the executive committee. That'd be great.
Okay, and
All right.
I have another item as well, but I
Mhm.
see first Lynn
Lynn.
has her hand up.
Just, I think Michael Davies is still here. Did I see in your report that you're pursuing that issue with the Secretary of State's office? Am I making that up?
Yes, that's correct. And with the county clerks.
Great. Thanks.
Is that good, Marjorie?
For that one, and
And
I
what's
have
next?
a second item, and that has to do with the resolution concerning our commitment to provide a welcoming transit experience. And we have committed in there to engage in stakeholder partnerships. And, I've talked about this with you, I think, and other people. I don't see this being accomplished unless we have someone who is organizing and addressing the need to talk to the jurisdictional leaders out in the district. For instance, I know there is activity towards scheduling tours of Union Station. And I think that's a good thing, but I don't think that is in my mind, the primary intent of this resolution is to actually work with our localities. And before we can do that, we need to have some sense of what it is RTD needs, what it is RTD can offer in working together, and what should we ask the localities for. One example of what we could do is to put together a short dog and pony show for city council meetings, county commissioner meetings, with a combination of staff and board members, presenting the situation, presenting RTD's dilemma, and asking for how we can work together. And I don't see how individual board members can actually do that. And I also see the need for consistency. So I'm hoping some help from CRL or some other means to put this program together and in action. We've made a significant commitment. I feel it's important for us to follow through.
Great, good comments. And maybe CRL might be the resource for us to begin that process. But, you know, I guess as, you know, as a director of a district, you know, you've got contacts with the electeds in your district, and maybe the board office can help put something together or coordinate scheduling with the general manager's office as well. But you're right, there are probably a lot of ways to go about getting this done, but one consistent method would be preferred. So Ms. McManus, you and I at our next week's meeting, let's put that on the agenda for you and I to talk about and see what we can come up with. And Secretary Sloan, we'll get back to you guys ASAP.
Great.
Gonna put you in charge, Marjorie. Okay, cool. Ms. McManus, go ahead.
So I would like Michael Davies to speak to where we are in the procurement of a local government solution, I'm going to call it, because it's a little bit of a different contract than we've had in the past. Right now, CRL Associates is retained through June through a contract extension, but we went out to RFP, and if Michael, if you could let us know where we are in that process so that we know some sort of a timeline to dovetail some of the work the directors want to move forward with.
Yeah, certainly. I would say that we're still in a blackout period, so I don't think it's appropriate to offer too much information. And to that point, I don't know if I have a good timeline to answer your question, but we'll certainly follow up as soon as I do.
Okay, is the RFP closed?
Yes, the bidding process was closed.
Okay, thank you.
Good point, Barbara. Thanks. Okay, anything else? Any other matters from anybody? No? Okay, it's 12:40 p.m. and we are adjourned. Thanks everybody for being here, helping and participating. Have a
Thank
great
you.
weekend.